Hi, my name is Katie, and I will be talking about colonialism and its effects of health in New Zealand. What is colonialism and why is it important? According to Webster's dictionary, colonialism is defined as extending and maintaining a nation's political and economic control on dominated people or area. This means that another country overpowers another nation, exploits it, forcing their own culture, language, and economic views. A notorious example of this is when Christopher Columbus came to the Americas in the late 1700s and conquered the indigenous lands there. This was done to many other lands around the globe in the 14th and 15th centuries and led to drastic consequences for the natives living there, like disease, environmental harm, and human rights violations that we still see today. So some history about New Zealand. The first settlers of New Zealand were Polynesian ancestors called Maori in 1200 to 1300 AD. The Dutch then arrived there in 1692, making them the first Europeans to visit New Zealand until after more than a century, the British came across the land in 1769. The land was used by whalers, sealers, and traders regularly until the British was pressured to settle due to competition with the French. On February 6, 1840 was the start of colonialism in New Zealand when the Maori chiefs signed a treaty, the Treaty of Waitangi, with the British government. The first influential war that led to colonization in New Zealand was the Musket Wars that started in the 1810s and ended in the 1830s. Nagufi Chief Hongi Hika set up the first church missionary society in 1814, which made more Europeans visit the land and establish greater trade. Hongi grew angry that the missionaries refused to trade muskets and power, leading to conflict with the balance of power. Due to the armed forces of Hongi's Hapu, the heavily armed northern forces of New Zealand attacked the ill-equipped southern side. As a result of European trade and influence, the civil war between the North and the South concluded in 1/5 of the Maori population dying and majority of the land being bought and taken by the British government, which started the colonization we see today. And so how this started the health in New Zealand, the effects of colonialism on disease and death rates were the first consequence of James Cook's visits, resulted in lower expectancy. In the 1800s, it went from 30 to 25 years old. This was caused by the introduction of new diseases from Europeans like measles, mumps, whooping cough, bronchitis, and tuberculosis. The Musket Wars and the Crown Purchase of the land in the 1860s caused the Maoris to be displaced, poor, and they were forced to move to overcrowded and unhygienic conditions. Losing their land also resulted in loss of traditional food resources, lack of resources, and poor diet. And this set the generational trauma we see today with the ancestors of the Maori. The health of the Maori ancestors today and most of the indigenous peoples around the globe are due to systemic inequalities, social determinants of health, which is the majority, is major, little to no access of healthcare. The 1900s was when the Maori became immune to the new diseases, and Maori-led scientists would work towards the stop of these diseases. Life expectancy rose in the 20th century due to places of education created in the 1920s, but it was still challenged with diarrhea, bronchitis, pneumonia, and dysentery. Influenza caused death 8 times as more common in Maori than in the other tribe in New Zealand, which is the Pākehā. Maori was disadvantaged socially and economically more than Pākehā because of poor nutrition and bad housing due to being forced into terrible areas by colonization. Today, Maori are still experiencing social determinants of health. Males have a life expectancy that is lower than a universal target of 70, while females have about 72. 38% of Maori men and 50% of women reach the age of 80 because of poor education, socially and politically undermined healthcare stigmatism that started after colonization. And on the other hand, 60% of non-Maori men and 71% of non-Maori women across New Zealand reach 80. Maoris are less likely to be referred to surgical care and quality hospital care than non-Maoris, and Maoris even have trouble getting healthcare in their local area. Doctors, with or without knowing, discriminate against Maoris by not giving them medication right away, and they are less likely to advocate for preventative measures. So my first recommendation to decolonize global health would be to start at healthcare. Due to oppression and colonization, the crown needs to be held accountable for the current state of the Maori and fix the situation by adding their holistic measure to health, access to healthcare, educating them on disease or illnesses, and opening the land that was taken from them to food and water. There needs to be a decolonization with medicine and healthcare so all Maori citizens can have a healthy and fair life. To do this, there need to be primary care physicians that come from other countries so they don't discriminate and learn and educate the primary care for Indigenous groups. Maori education should be implemented in medical school or classes that take place in New Zealand in order for change to start for the children for future generations. And then my second recommendation to decolonize global health would be policies, because they have a huge impact on the medical fields and access to medicine. Maori community policies were implemented during the 20th century to advance their health, but were changed or at risk of changing to the government or funding. There needs to be a change at the government level for Maori communities to receive funding and to make it so every family can be educated or helped, no matter their socioeconomic status. For Maori communities to receive funding for hospitals, medical school, and proper education on healthcare, there should be a tax on citizens who live on colonized land. This can be the consequence of their colonization and how the Maori suffered for generations because of their actions and the delayed help that they deserve. My last and third recommendation is stigma. Like the concept of critical race theory here in the United States, there needs to be education throughout schools to teach students about the effects of colonization, how that still affects their ancestors today, and how they might still have a stigma whether they know it or not. By creating a class, nurses and doctors are required to take that teaches them the lack of healthcare Indigenous people go through because of colonization, and how, even though that was centuries ago, it still affects them today. In conclusion, the only way we are going to solve wrongdoings are by teaching history, listening to the people that are still affected today, and searching for ways people can become better for the future. Thank you.